All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. Today is really a talk about the military transformation that's currently underway and what's happening commercially. I'm talking about the innovation, the new technologies, and how soldiers are sort of incorporating all of this into the battlefield, and really how much of what's happening is happening up in space. There really could scarcely be a better time for this discussion. Not only does this week mark the 5-year birthday of the creation of the U.S. Space Force, but the panel we have today is just an exceptional one. So I'm just going to get right to it, and then we're going to jump into this conversation. The way this format's going to work is we'll have about 45 minutes of conversation initially, and then the last 15 minutes of the talk, we'll do Q&A. So as we're talking, those in attendance, put your questions in the chat. We will try to get to as many of them as possible. One of my colleagues will be sort of collecting them and emailing them to me. And so I will use that last 15 minutes to kind of rattle through as many as possible. Don't wait to the end, however, because we're going to be getting those emails in sort of as we go. So without further ado, let's get to our panel here. Major General Stephen Butow has joined us. Just joined us a minute before this call, so thank you for jumping on the call. He's of the Defense Innovation Unit. Colonel Richard Kniseley of the Commercial Space Office at U.S. Space Force, and Arthur Grijalva, excuse me,
Grijalva,
of SpaceWERX, which is sort of the innovation arm of the U.S. Space Force. Now, all of your work kind of runs in parallel to advancing innovation, adopting new commercial technologies, and generally just strengthening national defense, with this idea of accelerating the integration of commercial technologies into military operations, but particularly in space. Before we get to all of that, because I know there's a lot of people on this call who want to sort of understand how your respective three offices work and really what your purviews are, I want to get into the nature of the threat landscape itself, particularly, for when we talk about emerging cyber threats, emerging threats from China and third-party actors as well. That sort of has democratized the battle space in a little bit more of a way than we've seen in the past. So, Major General Butow, I was hoping that we could start with you, just to kind of give us a sense of what the threat landscape looks like now, and maybe how that has evolved in the last 5-10 years.
Sure. I go to the Air Force guy for the space threat, but yeah, I'll take a good crack at it, and then I welcome the others to chime in. So the interesting thing is that when I started flying airplanes in the Air Force, a couple decades ago, the mantra was we needed air superiority in order to defend and protect our interests and in the joint fight, and space was largely a support capability, and very few of us actually had access to both narrowband and broadband SATCOM. All of us leveraged GPS starting from the first Gulf War going forward, and lots of other great capabilities. But with all the I would say the democratization of space technology, a lot of the emerging capabilities, space is much more accessible and for good, but also for those who want to project threats. So today, threats can come from all directions. It's very easy for even a small state actor to influence things over great distances. We think of the homeland as no longer a sanctuary that is beyond the reach of either other states or non-state actors, and so on a whole new level. And for the Space Force, it's not just about defending and protecting all the capabilities that are on orbit, but they still have to provide even more support in terms of communications precision navigation and timing, all the things that we use every day. And they have the biggest area of responsibility of all, especially above the Kármán line. The other thing which I think is amazing is, not all of our allies and partners have the same space capabilities to do that mission. So they're additionally having to work and outside of the comfort of having U.S. only capabilities. And a lot of they come in is how do the commercial technology to give us an asymmetric advantage in this sphere. So
I think you raise a couple interesting points here. And first off, this sort of the nature of having our two sort of great oceans on either side of this country is sort of no longer the buffer zone that it used to be is a critical one, but also the democratization of how many of these new technologies both offers advantages, but also increases the threat landscape a bit more. Colonel Kniseley, I think I've heard you use this phrase quite a bit. In fact, many people have used this: congested and contested, and also speed and scale. Like I think these are almost like the four words that seem to be tossed around at great length when it comes to the sort of the greater commercialization of this space. Let's start there then. How do you start to employ the industrial base to sort of meet those challenges, and why is it different, right? Because if I'm thinking about this, I'm coming at it from a layman perspective. I might have looked like, well, the Pentagon's always had defense contractors, and there's just sort of a new iteration of that. But it's not really. This is really a sea change. Can you explain that?
Yeah, definitely. So first, thanks for having me, Space News, and you definitely hit the nail on the head. We're almost at our fifth birthday in the Space Force, so happy birthday to all the Guardians out there, Semper Supra. Um, yeah, definitely. We stood up the Space Force to really highlight what you were alluding to in the contested, congested landscape that we're in. Going back before the Space Force was, born, the U.S. was the preeminent force that's out there in space, and we were, holding most of the satellites and the technologies. Fast forward today, we do have the pacing challenge of Russia and China that have been nipping at our heels with regards to their own space capabilities, because they do understand that, in the next eventual war, that space is that ultimate high ground, and that it is a warfighting domain that, like the general was mentioning, supports whether you have naval forces, ground forces, and air forces. Space is inherent in everything that we do, not just in the military, but also in the economic sector and civilian life. I think everybody knows what GPS is. I use my maps today, and one of our more successful constellations. But that's why we have to change how we are acquiring our space capabilities. You can listen to Mr. Calvelli talk about his acquisition tenants, and gone are the days of those 10-year acquisition builds where you're really stuffing a lot of requirements into something exquisite out there. When you're starting to talk about scale and speed, we need to, sometimes take a lesson from what Derek Tournier's doing in Space Development Agency, where you're putting capability up there on a launch cadence, and if it makes it there, awesome. If not, we're going to get it on the next iteration, and then that way we're constantly replenishing our technology, and we're not getting mired in what we call requirement creep. But what that scale and speed allowed us to do is to really tap into what we're all here today is to talk about, those commercial capabilities. The commercial sector is growing every day, and the speed and scale that they're coming up with answers to our questions and our problems, we now know that we need to take advantage of that. So, having organizations like the Commercial Space Office, SpaceWERX, and DIU that are looking at those emerging technologies, having the ability to invest in those companies, and then also raise the technical readiness levels of those capabilities. But at the end of the day, integrating those with our program executive officers to make sure that it's part of their um, technology roadmap, that we're not just so much buying commercial for commercial sake. We are here to produce a net effect for the warfighter, and
Yeah.
commercial definitely plays a part in that. And the last thing I do want to mention, and I think Bucky hit the nail on the head with regards to international. We are all in this together, and international needs to be thought of first, not an afterthought, because we are all integrated together, running exercises together, joint operations, so that the difficulty with space is lots of data coming in, and we need to make sure
Yeah.
it's correct. But we also need to make sure that everybody can utilize these capabilities. And, if we talk about CASR afterwards, when we surge and scale, making sure that we don't at some point have a undue effect to our international partners that are using those same capabilities.
It's interesting. You talk about sort of the possibility of an eventual war, but it almost strikes me, and I just want to follow up this, and Arthur, I'm going to get you just in one second, that when you talk about space superiority, the nature of having that, or at least having a robust presence in space, buttressed by these commercial endeavors, is almost a not almost is very much a deterrent to potential war in that sense. Um, and I wonder if you can comment on not only that and sort of what space superiority actually means in practice, but also when you look at principal rivals of the United States and its Western partners. Beijing is clearly among the top of the list, and yet there's a very different approach that the two countries have taken. Whereas in the West, there's been more of a heavier lean on the commercial side, where in the East, yes, there is a commercial space sector there, and yes, they're developing all kinds of new technologies, whether it's in launch capabilities or things of the quantum nature or AI. They strike me as just remarkably different approaches to this sort of burgeoning rivalry that's brought to bear up in the cosmos. I wonder if you can address that.
Yeah, definitely. So, what the pacing challenge sees, and definitely what we want to see, is that they see all of the commercial capabilities that are available, and they automatically think that we're all in this together. It's all one team, one fight. So, if they see a capability that's up there, they automatically are assuming that you must be working with the U.S. So, when you start to think of a
Mhm.
deterrent, and my mind automatically goes to what we're doing with like a proliferated LEO architecture, thousands of satellites up there. You know, where is an enemy going to go? How are they going to strike? I mean, it's almost mind-boggling, because they could take a shot at a certain area, but there's thousands of other satellites up there that will back it up. So that's
Right.
why I've really enjoyed proliferation. You can read through even the Space Force commercial strategy, and one of the tenets of that is diversification of supply chain and suppliers, because we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. You could Arthur, Bucky, myself, we're always looking at different capabilities, different suppliers. We're looking to invest in multiple and champion them to make it to the end, because we know that a proliferated capability is a deterrent onto itself, because the challenge won't even know where to go. When you're talking about differences, though, I definitely would say the West definitely respects, in my mind, the private industry. In a perfect world, the government would be one customer of many. We know in certain mission areas will be that anchor tenant, but we want companies to be profitable, and we don't want them to be more or less beholden to the government. Whereas on the East, yes, they are producing capabilities, but it's pretty much the government still kind of owns those capabilities. So there's a lot less bureaucracy over there, but we also believe in free market over here. So there are a lot of challenges, but I also think that there have been a lot of victories in the building. You know, a lot of great efforts that have stood up to invest in these capabilities. And I know our acquisition leaders are looking at other ways to hopefully cut down that red tape in the future.
Great. Arthur, I want to get to you right now. You're at SpaceWERX, and so for those who don't know, it's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like the VC of the Space Force in a way. Like you make investments into ideas. I'm hoping that you can maybe, for those in attendance and just kind of like for general into this in terms of this conversation, give us a little bit of insight into how that process works, and like where are you looking? What sort of strikes your fancy in terms of like what when you look at the marketplace, how does that shake out?
No, absolutely. And thank you for having me. First off, so lucky to be here with such a great panel. SpaceWorks constantly, we work with Bucky's team to make sure we partner on some of these investments. And then on Rich's side, absolutely critical for us to be aligned with PEOs, what the Space Force needs. And also some of the key personnel from my team come from his team. So lots of partnership and synergy across. So really, here at SpaceWorks, we really want to take the best and brightest ideas, and I really think that that's great. That's what we need to win in a great part of competition, because our greatest strength as a nation is our ingenuity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So we look for the best and brightest ideas, we invest into them, and then we aim to transition those into programs of record and PEOs to get to the warfighter by really taking advantage of what the commercial market comes to bear. So the way we do that is we put funding into all the way from studies up to strat or strategic funding initiatives. And really what that is a strat could be $60 million or more. And that's a partnership between SpaceWorks, programs of record putting funding, and private capital. So the private capital piece is really important to make sure that we all come together to have that synergy to be able to deliver results. So one example for that would be tactically responsive space. So actually, Bucky's organization, my organization, we're working with Space Systems Command to be part of it with the Victus Hayes mission that's coming up. And that's really going to show the commercial might of what we can do. So on the DIU side, Rocket Labs could be launching up into space. And on the SpaceWorks side, it's True Anomaly. So we're going to go up into space. We're going to show how we can rapidly respond to threats. And really, the two systems are going to do a dance in space, do rendezvous proximity operations, characterize each other. And it's really sending a message to China and Russia that you can't just do whatever you want in space without us being able to respond to it. So
Mm.
that's just one example of how we do that. But really, we get our priorities from the PEOs and also from Honorable Cavalli's office. We're constantly working to make sure that we're closing on capability gaps for the Space Force.
And General Butow, I want to kind of thank you, Buck. Thank you, Arthur. I think that that's really helpful in terms of this conversation. I'm gonna come back to you in terms of specifics, like what you like. So I'm not gonna let you off the hook quite yet for that. But um, this next year, um, it's going to be a fascinating one. I mean, just the ramp up of all these commercial technologies. We have new leadership coming in, a new administration coming in. Obviously, there is a lot of emphasis on the commercial sector, at least from the commentary that I've seen and what we've seen in the past. I'm wondering like where you might see opportunities for growth in this, particularly on the heels of, I think it was just yesterday, Representative Mike Rogers, who heads up the House Armed Services Committee, said Space Force needs to grow. And particularly he was referencing threats from China and elsewhere as they start to emerge. But like, what are those opportunities in this coming year? What does that look like? What are the challenges? What do you see in the landscape ahead?
Well, I wanted to emphasize something too. This is very much a team approach, whereas Arthur and SpaceWorks is oriented to Space Force. DIU, we're the innovation organization that supports the combatant commands and the joint force. And so, and really what we try to do is use our resources, the flexibility of our contracting mechanisms to go after things very quickly And we're somewhat in a requirements-free zone. We're a very small team, so we want to ideally leverage work that's already being done by all the innovation organizations, including SpaceWERX. So this is how these partnerships occur. I think so. And then really, we modified our mission statement to include speed and scale. So the services are the scaling factor. Those programs, when they get their POM funding at the end of the planning, programming, budget, and execution cycle, we want to move out quickly in order to give our warfighters an advantage. And leveraging the commercial sector has been a fantastic way to do this. And in this next year, more specifically, we're going to see a continued maturation of heavy lift, significantly drop the cost of access to space, and that as that cost comes down, more business plans become actionable.
You're breaking up
Represented
just
on the call
just a
today.
little bit there in terms of the webinar, but I want to like jump in on something that you said in terms of not only lowering costs, but the breadth of the commercial space is not restricted only to those within the boundaries of this country. And Colonel Kniseley,
That's right.
yeah, maybe Colonel Knight, maybe you can address this in terms of, because you mentioned this a little bit more in terms of the international partners. I'm wondering kind of what that looks like. You know, the emphasis and the primacy of building those global partnerships, not only in the public sector, but obviously, you know, in the private sector, and where all this sort of meets in the middle. But the questions of challenges that you have with companies that are sort of outside the scope of parameters of how U.S. companies typically operate, that challenge has to be different in at least in a way.
Yeah, definitely. So, this kind of dovetails into, some of the focuses that we have on CAS, or a lot of the international companies.
Before you do, can you explain what CASR is for everybody who's in
Oh,
attendance?
I'm sorry. So the Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve, I'll just give a brief description. So in February of 2023, the government decided to embark on a journey, if you will, to see, does it make sense to stand up a commercial space reserve, kind of akin to what the Civil Reserve Air Fleet is on the air side. Um, a lot of that comparison, quick departure, because, our commercial partners are operating in the AOR today. We have commercial partners over the AOR that, obviously you're going to stay there. You're not going to just
Sure.
maneuver around it. So
Part of this, though, part of this
whereas
is thinking like the buttressing America's sort of warfighting capability in expectation of potential conflict.
Exactly. The whole premise of it is, peacetime integration, so that we could exercise wargame it, get it into our operations, and through the framework or contract, we have the ability to scale, surge, and, in the event of a national war, call on that full use of that capability, and
Yeah.
prioritize that for U.S. Government use. We were primarily looking at U.S. Companies for that, because it was a little bit easier with just utilizing a U.S. company and working with that partnership. Whereas international companies, the governments are usually a stake owner in that. So if you think about it from an operation of war, sometimes that government does not want to get involved in some of the our affairs, if you will, with a hostile actor. So we have not shut the door on that. I definitely want to put that to bed. It's an added risk element that we have to look at. But going back to international, we have countries out there that are investing in space capabilities right now, and they come to the Space Force and the government, through SATFI-A, through the Space Systems Command International Affairs Office, and even CSRO and at Space Force headquarters, and they talk about these. And I actually want to mention Air Marshal Godfrey, who came onto General Saltzman's staff as the Assistant Chief of Space Operations, because General Saltzman actually mentioned this, I believe it was at the Space Power Conference, that we want to think of international first and make sure that we're not investing in something that somebody else already is. Why not tie that together? And, we even kind of showed that with a recent contract award with SES
Mhm.
for their Empower constellation, where we bought bandwidth, and now we were able to allocate. We bought it through the NATO, and now we have bandwidth that we were able to allocate to other forces. Great success there. We should have a launch pretty soon where we have a payload on the QZSS Japanese um, payload. So,
Would you say
that's
that this
another.
is kind of part and parcel of a cultural shift within warfighting, just the general framework of how it's looked at?
It
Or is it sort of maybe a hallmark of outside forces just that are just undeniable in terms of the innovation and new technologies and speed by which these are all brought to bear?
Yeah, if I had a Scantron in front of me, I would click E for all of the above.
All right.
It goes down to money. I mean, we can't afford everything. We are a global society, and we have some very strong international partners, and we know that if in the event of a national war, we are all going to be working together. So why not get after this now and share that capability? And, I'll definitely mention, the Space Force, as General Saltzman's talking about growing. It's also growing the budget right now. And we need to get very creative with the dollars that we have and make sure that we are investing in like capabilities and then offsetting some of the things that we want to invest in if one of our partners is already investing in it as well.
Now, Arthur, I want to jump to you because you've got, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a $470 million per year portfolio. Is that accurate? That's what you're dealing with here? I,
That's
I'm
correct.
I'm wondering like how you not only how you make decisions and like how you fund some of these promising new space technology and find these little gems in the industry that could potentially turn into something big, but given what Colonel Kniseley just said in terms of the pace, but also the geopolitics of you know, the dizzying array of satellites that Beijing has put up that are all not all but many of which are ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and target acquisition. Um, how is that played into the decisions that you make and where you're looking? Like if you have your chunk of money, where do your priorities go? Knowing that is in the sort of the back of your mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, the threat is real. Without the Space Force, we'd be blind, deaf, and mute. Like you were saying, China has they've over doubled the amount of satellites that they have on orbit in the last few years. So how do we win against that? And really, what we're looking at here at SpaceWorks is how do we have the most bang for the buck and really help shape what the commercial market is doing. So, a few key examples would be in the last year, we had 16 of those strat those big efforts that I talked about earlier, and that unlocked $865 million. So, not just our funding, but funding from private capital and from the programs of record to go after some of these capabilities that we want to build. Five of them went after production lines. So, how can we set up production lines to be able to go after what Rich was talking about? These proliferated architectures, being able to build space vehicles faster, cheaper. Some of these companies, they started off as just an idea in a garage 3 or 4 years ago, and now they're actually have the capability to build satellites, which is pretty amazing. So really harnessing the strength and power of the commercial market to go faster. And then also some game-changing technology. So one of them is that I'll highlight from Impulse Space. They have a Helios kick stage. That was one of the things we invested in, and that can get you can use maybe like a Falcon 9, get up into Leo, and then use the kick stage to get up into Geo in like less than a day. So those are some like the key capabilities. Is we're always looking for game-changing capabilities, as well as like what are the ways to unlock and scale the commercial market to go after Space Force needs.
I want to put you on the spot a little bit more. What else do you have? What else is out there that's groundbreaking that you find interesting?
Oh, okay. Another company that I think is really great is Inversion Space. They have what I call little space planes, and they're able to. Their idea is to be able to have 30 of these up in orbit and be able to get anything on the ground within half an hour. So we're looking at the possibility of focusing on INDOPACOM, being able to put supplies in theater really quickly. And of course, if you're a small space plane, you might be able to do other cool things in space that could be game changing for the Space Force. Another example I would give would be something that came out of my Orbital Prime program, where we were investing into the in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing portfolio.
Hmm.
We invested 120 million into that portfolio with 40 companies. One of the companies was Starfish Space, and we are part of that demo that they're going to have, where they're going to launch a space vehicle into GEO, and it's going to be able to grab another space vehicle and throw it into the graveyard orbit of GEO. So those are some of the cool things that we're trying to unlock, and we're able to do it pretty cheaply. And I think this is what we need if we want to win. If we go into a fight in 27, we really need to unlock what's coming out of the commercial market and really infuse that into the warfighter's hands.
The garage startups that you mentioned, I mean, I think that is the most fascinating aspect of all this, frankly. I've been to a couple of those factories that looked like, I think one was like a former glass making building, and it was just
Yeah.
inside. They're just doing in situ a research potential manufacturing in space. Um, the I think I want to stay on this topic a little bit because I find this stuff so fascinating. We've kind of identified the broader threat landscape. We've talked about the cultural shift that's underway. Major General Butow, what strikes your fancy when it comes to all this? Not only in terms of the Defense Innovation Unit, but and where you see the focus, but what gets you excited? Like what are you looking at right now that just is just different? Uh-oh, I think you might be muted.
Yeah, sorry about that.
This is
Our
the ultimate tease too.
Yeah, I know that the wicked problem in this area, because we do lots of training from cyber
Oh, I think you're breaking up
autonomy.
just a little bit here. I tell you what, I'm gonna pause on that question. I'm gonna come right back to you with it, and maybe we can get a better connection. But Colonel Kniseley, same question for you.
I'm sorry, David, can you repeat that, please?
Sure. So we've talked about sort of the broader geopolitical threatscape and the paradigm shift that we've seen, for lack of a better term, when it comes to sort of commercial integration, the transformation that the military is really adopting, particularly when it comes to Space Force. But similar to what Arthur was mentioning in terms of specific examples, like what gets you excited about what you're seeing in the innovation front from specific companies or just general trends?
Um, there's a lot of things, I mean, first of all, being the leader of the commercial space office, I feel like I've got 1,000 tools in my toolkit because, all these companies, come through the front door. I mean, we've had 800 companies come through the front door that want to get involved in the DoD. So the outpouring of innovation that in the commercial sector is awesome. In addition to a lot of the companies that Arthur listed, just some of the improvements and the innovations that we've seen in satellite bus manufacturing, like in Apex that is on orbit right now, and they're going very low cost satellite buses, low energy. But then you flip it on its head, and you've got a company like K2 that are still going low cost, but larger SVs at higher power. So you could almost see, them going after different missions and that are needed out there because it's not just the Space Force that needs to get capability out there faster, but it's also our IC partners need to get these capabilities out there as well. Another partnership that we have is with InQtel.
Mhm.
InQtel started in the IC community, and I think it was just I want to say it was just this year we signed the very first Space Force memorandum of agreement and partnership with InQtel. So
Mm.
that is a way to invest in companies. But now we are also investing not just Space Force dollars, but also IC dollars are going into those same programs. So we've got two sides investing in companies, and now you're getting after similar technologies that work for both sides. So we're doing cost share as well. So, you know, when you talk about excitement, it's really the blending of, Title 10, Title 50. I mean, we're getting closer and closer together just by the sheer nature of the space environment. And then, add in the added amount of commercial and international partnership. I mean, this is exactly what you want out of a space enterprise is everybody co-located together, working together, for their various different missions. Um, I just want to make another mention, in that Space Force strategy that was signed this year in April, we outlined the 9 areas or 8 or 9 areas that we felt that commercial companies should be going more towards, like a
Mm.
commercial SATCOM, Arthur mentioned SAML. We're doing great things with commercial space domain awareness, command and control, cyberspace operations, TAC SRT. That's been another huge growth for commercial and the analytics and making sense of different phenomenologies. But what that strategy allows companies to do is to really hone in on those certain areas that we want to really have more robust conversations on. And then we roll out various different industry days where we have those conversations further. But then this is where, the partnership with a SpaceWERX, with a DIU, start getting those investment dollars out there while we work with the PEOs to palm down range. The whole apparatus and the process are really starting to, come together. And the last thing I want to mention is, probably what will happen next year is the stand-up of Futures Command and the Space Force. So, the mission of
Mm.
that will be technologies and capabilities probably
Explain
outside
though
the
that
prime.
how that fits in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Explain it
so
with.
future Yeah, so Futures Command, that'll be another field command for the United States Space Force. It'll have three distinct areas. It'll have a concepts division where they're looking at technologies that are out there that we potentially want to invest in, integrate, to stay ahead of the threat. But then
Yeah.
that second division for wargaming and exercises is, how do we integrate that? And I've seen a huge growth in commercial participation in exercises of war games. Just recently in Shriever War Games, having even members of my team there to kind of test out and look through how we're doing processes on CASR. But the last piece of it is SWAC, the Space Warfighting Analysis Center. So now all of this kind of flows in better with the force design. They're going to get these force designs out there faster. They're going to stay ahead of the threat, and it'll really help us better align a lot of our investment, through, AFRL, through SpaceWERX in Arthur's area, but then also giving a lot of that demand signal out to Bucky and DIU as well. So it's when you start thinking about next year, there is a lot of stuff going on next year.
General Butow, let's try again. Let's see if the connection's a little bit better. Just in terms of
Yeah,
what
hopefully
that
you're hearing me
question
fine
was,
now.
and your interests, your fascinations, the things that kind of get you excited about what's happening in this sort of this new brave world we have in terms of innovative new technologies.
Can you hear me fine now?
I can, yes, that's great.
Good. So the really it's not just what the small startup companies are doing, it's what the big companies are doing as well.
Yeah.
We're able to write contracts with really large corporations, foreign companies. We're doing challenges right now in India, in Australia, and others, and helping to bridge that gap so that the Space Force can have more meaningful relationships across the entire enterprise. The commercial space market is very nascent. It's not like the cyber market. It's not like the artificial intelligence market is very similar. And so you need a lot of investment, but the lead times for these companies to become revenue bases is it takes a little bit longer, right, than a lot of the terrestrial economies. And that's a very important factor because we don't want to have a Huawei moment where China, who had very deeply invested with their commercial sector, is able to go out and seize a lot of the markets where we may be restricted by policy and otherwise. So the very nature of just sharing and collaborating with our partners and outside the United States is really challenging. So right now, all these things are getting a shot in the arm. We're finding new ways to work together. It's a whole team effort. And what we really want in that great power competition, let's compete economically. Let's compete in other fronts. We just don't want to compete militarily, right? And so as you appropriately inferred, the deterrence has to be credible. And that means not just that we're doing commercial stuff, but we're also freeing up more money so the Space Force and the other services can focus on those things that are inherently, governmental, and leverage the lessons learned from all this great technology to go after new capabilities, which is very much a focus of the strategy.
Yeah, is there a concern? I just as you're talking, I kind of just thinking a little bit more in terms of challenges, right? And because of the challenges are not small, but one of the bigger ones I would think is that as a greater push towards commercialization in terms of warfighting capabilities and just general situational awareness becomes a bigger part of sort of the modus operandi of how all this takes shape, and there is a greater lean on international partners. And there is a question about the integration of AI and quantum computing technologies. It feels like there's a little bit of a concern or a danger of a hands off the wheel approach to some of this, in the sense that companies that you might be partnering with, not necessarily within this country, technologies that you're integrating in order to keep pace with just the sheer demand and the speed by which all of this is operating. It almost necessitates taking a human operator a little bit out of the equation in comparison to years past. Does all of this, does this almost, I don't want to use the word outsourcing, but there is that question about guardrails that does come and bear here. And I want to just open that up to the group here in terms of who can address that and what concerns you about this.
I'll take a crack initially. I think it's important to know that the guardrails are very much something that we lead in with. We don't for artificial intelligence. The department adopted ethical standards for the use of AI. Before a lot of industries did, and so what's important is we want humans on the loop. We want guardians on the architecture, not divorced from it. Most of the most significant improvements for the warfighter today is having increased situational awareness, more time to make critical decisions. These are fundamental things that if you have a decisional advantage in space and time, that's very that's huge. And we unfortunately, because of the limitations with our architecture, a lot of the information collected in space never makes it to the ground, right? It's just thrown away. And how do you better optimize that? Well, what you do is you take the compute to the sensor right? You take and these are kind of the areas where SpaceWERX, DIU, and others are working with industry to explore new ways of making our processes more efficient, and getting left of launch, right? So if look how the commercial sector working with the government, everybody saw the invasion of Ukraine coming because of space technology, right?
Sure.
And that's really huge, and it also actually creates a lot of trust, and the entire world saw what was unfolding in near real time because of that extra lens, and we didn't have to reveal any special capabilities that the government had, right, in doing that. So I think it's very prudent. We are constrained by policy, right, and I think that's we're actually doing a lot of innovation on the policy front to make sure that we can use emergent capabilities when we need to, and the Congress and the administration have a big voice in that.
We're going to go to question and answers just in a moment here. We got about 15 minutes left, but I did want to get one more question to you, Arthur, before we did. And we can maybe just kind of keep it somewhat abbreviated, but it's actually a question for all of you in the sense, I imagine there are a lot of people watching here that have ideas and maybe have companies and have, they're pushing the boundaries, and they want to know, how do they get to you? How do they pitch you? How do they get their ideas in front of you? What are you looking for in terms of like the process, and really what's the difference in terms of where they go between your through your respective offices? And maybe Arthur, you can kick that off, and then we'll launch into to audience questions.
Yeah, so to reach us specifically, we have a website, spaceworks.us. We're also up on the socials. We're constantly at conferences. We host a lot of events here in El Segundo and throughout the country. And really, we really want to bring in as many of the non-traditionals, private capital investment, everyone all together to try to team and make sure that we are aligned. I will also say what we traditionally do is we'll work with COMSO, we'll also work with DIU, and make sure that if a company comes to us, that we send them to the right part, or we'll help give a warm handoff, or even just tie and thread everything together so that we're all aligned as one team. So that's how I think it's best to work with us.
That's great. And our first question actually comes from space news journalist Sandra Irwin, who effectively planted that question in my head, and she's has a question that's very much in line. And this is really for all the panelists, but Colonel Kniseley, you started this front door initiative, but there's still some concerns that companies have to spend a lot of time and resources chasing sort of multiple organizations. And so she wants to know if there's a way to streamline this a little bit.
So I mean, we started the front door in 2022 to be that one-stop shop for industry to go to. It was kind of interesting. I hearken back to Chairman Rogers' comments yesterday at CSIS when he talked about the 80 faces chart of 100 people to say no, but none of them can say yes. But think of a new startup who has never worked with the DoD. Who do they even talk to? How do they have the conversations and stuff? So that's what we did with the front door. But when we revamped that front door tool in August, or I believe it was August of 2023, we made it more automated, but we had the ability to group together many different organizations in the back hall of the front door tool. So to date, I have well over 20 agencies connected into the front door. So when a company comes through the front door and inputs their information, the areas that that they want to align with, and we talk about other contracts and whatnot, that's being seen by multiple different mission areas. So it's not just Space Systems Command, but it's also the NRO, it is also Spock and, even NASA's hooked into that. And we've even been asked by the international community to more or less franchise that so they can have their own front door. So what we also do is to do those handoffs for those companies and stuff. We have everybody, we have a huge log of making those handoffs with those different companies. So it's not just talking into a machine. You will talk to a actual human being. And now that I've staffed up my office, the turnaround time is a lot better. But we will make those connections. We will help them understand where this fits into the architecture. We will align them with groups like Bucky and Arthur that can provide cyber sitters dollars or investments. But the other thing we're doing is talking with the investment community and making sure that they understand the mission areas that we're going after. And then even with many of those smaller companies, we have aligned them with venture capital investors, people that we think that would be good ties to that. So it's really become, kind of its own little animal, and it makes those touch points that much faster.
The next question actually blends really well into this. This is from Greg Orndorff. It's sort of a streamlined question. He says, with so many propulsion technologies and options available from commercial providers to address resiliency needs of platforms, when will we start seeing requirements for on-orbit maneuvers? I'm going to open this up, sort of the group here, if that's something that anyone wants to jump in on.
Well, one thing that we're doing over here at SpaceWERX is we're actually working with U.S. Space Command on a sustained space maneuver challenge, where we're working directly with the operators to see what are their operational needs, how could we work together. The great part about that is it's not just the government telling folks what to do. It's, hey, let's bring together the government, the program office, the operators. Let's bring in private capital. Let's bring in companies. Let's bring in academia. Let's solve this problem together. And then we at SpaceWorks, we invest money into that. So, I think we invested about $40 million into that effort, where we let off contracts to actually go after that challenge and give that demand signal to the companies. And in the end, we'll be working with DIU and COMSO and the PEOs to see how can we make sure that money follows the initial investment that we made, so they can actually transition and get into operations. So that'd just be one example of showing demand signal for that.
The next question is actually more of a people question. So we went from the technology now to the people. This is from Jeffrey Martin. He asked, how about the soft tissue issues? That rhymes. How do you envision the part-time aspect of the Personal Management Act working? In particular, what are the benefits or risks to commercial space firms in making their talent available to the U.S. Space Force? What are the main organizational and individual issues that need to be worked out? So this is sort of a question of integration, so to speak.
So I guess I'm the guardian. I'll take that question. So, we stood up or the Space Force stood up the PMA to get after people that want to serve, but they're also serving in industry and agencies that they can bring that expertise to the U.S. Space Force on a part-time or even on a full-time level. So it's been very refreshing to see, the outpouring of people that want to come forward, serve their nation, but they have a lot of insight and know-how that they could bring to the fight. Many of these folks work for a company, like a SpaceX. A lot of the companies that Arthur and Bucky mentioned, that they want to serve, but also do that. So we need to understand better how commercial can bring efforts to bear. And on a part-time basis, they can easily come in, help out with an acquisition, help out with an exercise war game, bring a little bit more realism into how things would be executed. And, obviously that would come with an agreement with their employer on how that would all how that would all happen. But for me as a guardian, I welcome anybody that wants to serve and put on the uniform. And as fast as everything is growing in the commercial space sector, getting that shot of innovation adrenaline into each of the different organizations is completely welcome, because it's going to help us stay ahead of the threat, but then also tap into new processes and ways of doing things.
I like that. Innovation adrenaline. I like that. I could pick that up at your local grocery
I'm
store.
going to trademark that and put it on a t-shirt.
Good, good. This next one is for Bernhard Gotthard, and this is sort of a broader question, but I like this one because it sort of details some of the specific threats, some of which we talked about, some of which we haven't actually. But he says basically that given the broad spectrum of threats in the space domain, including cyber attacks, which we haven't really gotten into that much, kinetic anti-satellite weaponry, and also things like space debris. What are your recommendations to effectively mitigate such a broad spectrum? And I will add on to that it strikes me that the nature of cyber warfare is even radically different than when it was when SpaceWERX was first formed, just 5 years ago, or almost 5 years ago this week. So these threats are inherently dynamic, but Major General Butow, you're shaking your head there. It sounds like you want to take that one, but
Oh, this is
help address it.
this is one of my favorite topics. So the one of the areas where we really need to focus as a nation is in microelectronics for extreme environments. So when we owned the heavens as a nation, and these threats were not nearly as credible, we tend to design for radiation hardening. Radiation is especially in orbits beyond Leo. I mean, it's a very harsh environment. The problem is that there's very special processes to do that, and we used to have trusted foundries to make these things, which is very expensive. So going forward, we really need to do two things. And there's many efforts to continue to make sure that we have access to radiation hardened parts where we need to, that are more modern in electronics. But a lot of the emerging commercial space areas, they want radiation tolerant capabilities because the systems are going to be replaced in like 3 years. They don't need to last. They become obsolete with the rate of change in technology today. So we really have to take advantage of that. We need processors that run with much lower power, which we need miniaturization, because managing the thermal energy in space is pretty tough, right? So there's a lot of really great things outside of the space industry. There's other industries that are going to enable greater capabilities, like imagine having a cloud in space, right, for information. And there are a lot of investments going in that direction. And so we want to draft off of that as a department. So we're not making those major investments. And some of those capabilities will come through the front door of space, and others will have other ways of getting in. But we've done a great job over this past year to with direction from the SecDef to create a defense innovation community entities, the DICE we call it, and that's how we cross-tell information between all the different innovation organizations. So we're trying not to duplicate efforts, try to reinforce each other, and make sure that there's an on-ramp. So if you come in through SpaceWERX, then we could very rapidly take advantage of your capabilities as they mature.
You made the line, when we own the heavens. If you haven't like signed that up for a book deal quite yet, then I would call your publisher right away. But
well, some people will say that we still own the heavens,
well, it's a really interesting point. I'd love to jump on that in the last couple of minutes that we have that. So do you think that the development and advancement, particularly when it comes to U.S. space efforts, benefits by having a rivalry? akin to what we saw in terms of the 1960s in the space race to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade.
Yep.
Has there been sort of an almost like a splash of cold water in the eyes in terms of establishing and retaining that superiority in space by virtue of a rivalry?
I really think, yeah, a healthy rivalry where you compete on economic and technological bases, but not kinetically, not militarily, and so there's the temperature global conflict tends to rise when people feel that the deterrence is not quite credible. So
Yeah.
what we're going to do is we're going to literally spray rocket fuel on a lot of space capabilities in the Space Force and in the industry to make sure that anybody who would want to take advantage of an opportunity like that thinks otherwise and competes in the ways that we do every day and other fronts.
All right, last question here because we only got about a minute left, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Amazon and Starling. But what challenges does the panel see in procuring commercial services? This is from an anonymous attendee. Commercial services from the likes of Starlink, Amazon, and does SDA's transport layer fill those gaps, or does it augment those services? I'll open it up.
Yeah, so I'll definitely take part of that. So we have through our PLEO contract through the commercial SATCOM office, both Amazon Kuiper and SpaceX, Starlink, utilizing the Starling constellation, are both vendors on that PLEO contract. Both have received task orders under that contract. Obviously multiple task orders have gone to SpaceX, but we have awarded a study task order to Amazon Kuiper to test out their or do a study on their 2 protosats that are out there. I have not had a problem contracting with either of them. I mean, while both have been on contract, both have been abiding by the terms and conditions of the contract, and they're performing a service for our men and women downrange. And it's while it's been on contract, it's been a very reliable service. You mentioned SDA. The work that Dr. Tournier is doing is absolutely crucial. Not just from a communications and data transport arena, but also some of the work that they are doing within missile warning, missile track, and then even taking a look at alt PNT. So I look at there is room for all, and kind of going back to an earlier point about proliferation, having all of those on deck, a military purpose built, but also with a layer of commercial, and then even sprinkle in international. That's how we are going to stay ahead of the threat.
Well, that is a good place to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you, our panelists, all of you in attendance for attending this latest webinar seminar, Integrating Commercial Space into National Security Opportunities and Challenges. Major General Stephen Butow, Colonel Richard Kniseley, and Arthur Grijalva. This is a real pleasure. I'm glad we could do this right ahead of the holiday season, right during the week of SpaceX fifth birthday here. And it was a real pleasure to have all of you. We'll be doing many more of these in the new year. And we'll also be launching actually a podcast in the new year as well. So stay tuned for that. So from all of us at Space News, we'll see you next time.